life living and making a living can sometimes wear us out, grind us down, and dull our senses. So for a keen mind and a sharp contributive edge that can make it all easier and better and more productive, let's take some time to sharpen our axe. Stay with us right now for Life Talk.
Hello, I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Bern Moses. Welcome to another in our series of ongoing verbal essays brought to you in this television format. It is a pleasure to have you with us today. Bern, we were having a very interesting conversation before the show about the challenges and the struggles that people have every day in their lives where they feel helpless to change the circumstances that surround them. They are struggling with their jobs, with their families, with their relationships, and they feel like it's out of their control. I can't make my boss be a better person. I can't make my work environment be a happier place to live. I can't change how much money I make. This is all they're going to pay me. I can't make my partner come home on time, do the dishes, mow the lawn. Well, I can't get my kids to do their homework. All the time, people are frustrated and upset because they have no power over their environment.
Sounds to me like they need to be empowered. I mean, I've heard this now for, gosh, it seems like a decade, but it's probably more faddish than that. You know, that 3 to 5 years or so, a lot of talk about empowerment and books on empowerment and what have you. And it's a pretty good word, but you know, we have a tendency in our society to kind of grab a hold of things like that and overdo it, you know, just hammer it into things. And I'll tell you, I read the books and I watch the lecturers on television and what have you, and it seems to me they keep just shooting right by the mark, talking in, you know, words and phrases and stuff that people nod knowingly about. You know what I mean? And yet
it doesn't make a difference in their lives.
No, they don't go home and nothing's different. And so we have to say, wait a minute. I mean, let's slow down here and examine this thing. Now, this has been going on for the last, 3 to 5, even a decade. But since 1972, we've been talking about some things that once people integrate them, hate to use the word, but they become empowered. You know what I mean? In other words, but really it's about authority. In other words, the other day we did a show where we talked about the third tablet. And tongue-in-cheek, a little facetiously, we talked about how Moses came down from the mountain and said, I have, 15 commandments. And he dropped one of the tablets and it broke, and he said, I've got 10 commandments. Well, we put that tablet together and came up with some ideas that are about empowerment, or actually recapturing authority so that we have more command over the direction our life is taking. And we can get back to that, and we might even hit on some of the commandments, not ments, because I don't want to get into trouble here, but commandments that lead us in the direction of feeling a lot more peace of mind, a sense of esteem about all of this. For years now, the idea has been to assist people in relinquishing control over their lives in order to be able to get in command of the direction their life is taking. Now you think, well, that's pretty close talk. I mean, that's a semantical difference. And yet, whenever I've encountered, and during a period in my life when I tended to be this way myself, control-oriented people, and people who want to be in control of their circumstances, their life, and their conditions, I will point to someone who is frequently upset and aggravated and agitated and frustrated and what have you.
Why is that?
They're constantly being reminded that they're not. In control, that is. You know what I mean? Control is a trick, a whimsical trick, if you would, of the Western mind, especially the Western mind. And we hear it every time I turn around in literature and in self-help books and on television, like I say, you hear a lot about control. And what we're saying is this: relinquish it, give it up, you don't have it anyway. We're not in control.
So don't be lying to yourself that it's possible.
Yeah, it's a very, control is a very subjective state. You know what I mean? In other words, boy, you've got to, and what you have to do if you think you're in it is that you actually have to control other people's behaviors and what they do. For example, a person's driving, down the road in his car, and cussing and swearing at everybody else's driving habits. You know what I mean? He's trying to control what they do with their vehicle. And that's about as ludicrous as you can get. I mean, you can't even influence. You know what I mean? In other words, they're going to do...
Generally not positively, anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you might give it a wave without using your whole hand or something. But the fact of the matter is there's no control over that. We make that comparison, too, in order to catch up our viewers that might have heard this before. The difference is, we can kind of make this analogy. How could you possibly say that a ship's captain was in control of the vessel when it's 300, maybe 400 miles off course because of a storm? I wouldn't call that being in control, but we have to acknowledge that he is in command of the vessel. Okay? Or if the engines break down and that screw's not spinning, captain's not in control of that vessel. I mean, it's subject to the whimsy of the wave and wind, boy, like a cork bobbing around in the ocean. Wouldn't call that being in control. Do you agree?
Yeah,
and
I
yet
agree.
He's in command of the vessel. He's still in command. Or if the crew sickens and is unable to function, that captain is not in control, but he is in command. What we're saying is this, that if he doesn't relinquish his authority, if he doesn't surrender to the conditions and circumstances, if he doesn't throw his hands up and say, I don't know what to do, I can't do anything about this, if he doesn't do that, but rather uses his cognitive capacity, his intellect, his experience, his knowledge, his awareness, in order to make choices and decisions, that 9,999 times out of 10,000, that ship's going to reach port. We know that, and probably on time. The sense is that you and I and all of our viewers are in command of the direction their life is taking. It's whether they understand that or not can make a difference. Because if a person doesn't understand that, then they throw their hands up and say, well, help me, I've got to find some way to control. In other words, but if they understand that out of this cognitive capacity of choice and will and decision making, that they can determine what's about to happen with incredible accuracy in the direction their life is taking. It's a matter of, it's kind of like what we've been doing. You know how companies have mission statements? Mm-hmm. Well, in what we do, we have a command commission, we call it. And I've taken that word and coupled it with another very powerful word, which is commission, which means actually the delegation of authority. Like if I commission someone to do a painting or a portrait, and I don't like the results, I'm going to have to pay for it anyway, because I commissioned this artist based on some prejudgment that I made, okay, to do the portrait. In other words, I'm responsible for the portrait, not for what they do. Follow what I'm saying? In other words, that's the way it works. And so you put command commission together, and you've got very powerful phraseology. And I don't know if the camera can pick this up on our board or not, but the command commission, we say, is what we're about, what we do on Life Talk, what we do in our live concerts, and one-on-one coaching, consulting, whatever we happen to do, is to assist people. Not help them. Don't want to help them, because you can't help people without hurting them. You know what I mean? When you help someone, you probably tend to enable them to be as weak as they might have been before, but to somehow to coach and to guide and to instruct and to assist, to elevate, to assist people in their efforts. Okay? Now, they may not even be making an effort, but to assist them in their efforts, which means to inspire them, to give them an idea that maybe things could be better, easier, more productive, happier, okay? But to assist people in their efforts to recapture and develop their authority, esteem, and initiative. See, here's the thing. Boy, there's so much here to cover. It's been pretty evident to me for nearly half a century that most of us have had our initiative trained out of us. Okay, it's been trained out of us because of authorities in our lives who have taken it upon themselves, okay, to abrogate and to confiscate and to appropriate our authority in order to get us to do what they want us to do.
And where does that start?
Babies, little babies. Parents who take that authority away from that child, and I'm not saying it's inappropriate, but oftentimes can be.
Maybe it's handled inappropriately. The
terrible.
Style or attitude
Sure.
with which they direct their children's lives.
Remember my Christmas story about the little boy who tugged on my britches? Mm-hmm. Anyway, for example, we're near Christmas now, and I can probably tell us. I was at a phone company one day in Dallas, Texas, And it just happened that I was dressed casually, which is not frequently. But I had a pair of red trousers on, happened to have a red windbreaker, and black boots. I used to wear, not big boots, but black boots. And you can imagine the image with the beard and the hair and what have you. And I was kind of looking at the bulletin board and kind of engrossed in thought of reading what was going on. And I felt this tug on my pants. And I turned around, there was nobody there, and I looked down, there was this darling little boy. He was as cute as he could be, probably maybe 2, 3. And he was looking at me. I mean, he had found his Santa, you know what I mean? He was excited. So I looked down, I said, "Hi, bud," and I talked to him as nice as I could. And his dad was across the little foyer there, and he said, "Jason, come here." He just was really agitated. And the little boy went over and he said, "I told you not to talk to strangers. Okay? You've got no business with him, you got no business with you. So you just sit down and be quiet." And I kind of, I tried to disappear. I didn't want to be a problem to Dad. I understand what the general attitude is. So I turned and I was reading some more of the stuff, and pretty soon I felt that tug again. So rather than looking down, I tried to honor the father, and I spoke directly to him. And I said, "You must be very proud of your little boy. I mean, I've raised 6 children, and got a lot of grandkids and what have you." And he didn't even acknowledge me. I mean, he didn't see me. He just grabbed Jason, this little guy, precious little boy, and picked him up and slammed him on the counter. His little bottom, you know how you can slam kids? And his counter was probably shoulder height. And he got in his face. And he says, "I told you once, I'll tell you again, you got no business, don't talk to people." There was this kind of thing. And Jason cocooned. See, that was the beginning of taking away all of his authority, all of his courage, all of his venturesome, his curiosity, his exuberance. Now, he probably wouldn't venture out much anymore, at least with his daddy around. And how long, and how is Daddy around? Daddy stays in our minds until if we're not careful, 20 and 30 and 40 and 50, and still is able to grab us and pick us up and throw us on that counter and say, "I told you." That's a diminishment of authority and esteem. You know what I'm saying? There had to be a better way of handling that, surely. You know what I'm saying? And so that's just one. How many times do you think things like that happen for Jason? Okay, and then he goes out into the world, and he gets outside the structure. See, in other words, typically what happens, our authority and esteem and our initiative is diminished by well-meaning and loving parents. No indictment here at all, but well-meaning and loving parents who kind of make all of our decisions and tell us what to do and what not to do, when to go to bed, when to get up, what to wear, and when to eat. You know what I mean? For the first few years. And then when we do go venturing off, sometimes we get yelled at and sometimes punished, put in the corner. For too much exuberance, they can't tolerate that because they're responsible for us, and so they have to control us and mold us and direct us, And so, hey, we're subject to that. And then you get around 5 or 6 years old, and the teachers take over, tell you when to study math and, when you're going to go to English and when you're going to do recess, and then they send you home and mother takes over again, or somebody does. And then you mature, and then you get into the military, and boy, they can do it for you, you know what I mean? If you're not aware. I spent 10 years in the military and did what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it, the way I wanted to do it. You know what I mean? I had a way of getting through all the foolishness in school with teachers and what have you, and then you get a job. You know what I mean? And then a whole system is designed to prepare people to behave. To get a job and keep your nose clean and get your check and retire someday.
Punch the clock when you come, punch the clock when you leave.
Yeah. Oh, and we were talking earlier about how they get us positioned in such a way where we're afraid to venture out and to be all that we probably could be because we got to pay the rent or the mortgage, and we've got to keep our credit. And they won't give us any if we don't have a job. Or if we're too sporadic in our employment. They got us. And it's not a plot. I'm not saying it's a plot, but it's a system. It's a system, you betcha. And so the idea is if you're going to be empowered, there has to be some way of going back and re-perceiving these experiences. See, all of our behavior has to be based on how we perceive things, the choices or the accommodations that we've made, okay, the experiences that we've had and how we interpreted them. I mean, that's who we are, okay. Now, for example, you have 2 children in the same environment. See, one child would rebel against that dad and become, really venturesome, The other child in the same environment will succumb, accommodate, adapt. Okay, and so he's lost it. So we don't know why that occurs. For example, I know someone who raised a fairly large family, and they've got 2 or 3 kids who are multimillionaires. Delightful people, and then one of them is in and out of jail all the time. You know what I mean? Same environment, but they somehow from the very beginning perceive things differently as they move from one life experience to another. And so we reach adulthood, and if we're not careful, we're still subject to the powers that be. And how do we get our authority back, which means being empowered? All right, and they talk about it, and I'm contending that they missed the mark. I don't think. That diminishes what we're saying. I'm certain, I know that one of the first steps we have to take is to acknowledge and celebrate our capacities. I was talking with a group of people the other day, and they quickly agreed that no one in the group could remember a single incident at home, at the dinner table, or in the den, or at bedside, okay? Or in any class in school, whether it was grade school or, junior high school, and secondary education. At no time in the workplace did anyone make it possible to just slow down for a minute, okay, just slow down, and let's think a minute about our capacities. To acknowledge the brain that we have and the mind that, is generated from that, the billions of brain cells, the cognitive capacities, just celebrate the fact that we can remember and imagine and make choices and decisions, and we can talk and walk and see and hear and speak. This is wow stuff. This is big stuff. But to celebrate that is the beginning of the assumption of responsibility. That's the beginning. See? How long? I've known you now 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. And every time I'm with you, and I'm supported by a lot of other people in this too, but every time I'm with you, I'm impressed with what I know there is there. Always. You got a good eye, you obviously have a good mind, you know what I mean? And for you to be reserved about anything is disallowing yourself something. Just how much could you accomplish? You know what I mean? If you could say, what would you dare not venture into if you had all your authority and all of your esteem in place? You're talking an adventuresome person that would be highly, highly productive because you'd have a lot of initiative. This is what we're talking about. To recapture, you got to get it back. See, and like I say, there's no indictment about any of this. This has just happened to all of us, some more severely than others, but we all have the capacity to recapture our authority, okay, and develop it. How do you develop it? Practicing it, venturing out, taking risks. See, in our society, the greatest risk we can take is what? To not take one. That's the greatest risk there is.
Can you repeat that?
Because
I just think that people don't realize how much they limit themselves.
That's right. Terribly. Yeah, but the greatest risk is to not take one. And it's getting more and more that way because the corporate entity is evidencing the fact that it really can't provide for you. We've been kind of stuck in that mode too long. It never has, but things were such that it was allowed to appear that way. But the thing of it is, any company's first, primary, appropriate, logical responsibility is to whom?
The bottom line.
Yeah, the stockholders.
Yeah.
Whoever put the money in have a right to expect their money back with a profit. That is the system, this capitalistic system. That's the primary consideration. If indeed they can keep you or I or somebody on the payroll. Now, when they do that, do you think that when they pay you a certain amount of money that they have to make a profit, otherwise they couldn't do that? Of course. And so they're going to pay you as little as they can, okay, in order to keep you.
Right.
And so we get conditioned that, hey, we better hang in here. See, here's the thing.
Well, they don't ever pay you what you're worth. They pay you what the job is worth.
Well, even then, no, I don't think so. That's an old phrase, but here's the thing. If you're vital at all, and you decide this is not enough, I'm going to move on, they start talking about more money. They start right away talking about advantages that you'd have if you'd stay. How come they didn't talk about that sooner?
They
They
had
didn't
no
have to.
motivation.
Didn't have to, right? Had no motivation to. And so,
And that depends on the job. I know there are a lot
Oh.
of jobs where they say, fine, don't let the door hit you on the way out.
right,
Because
exactly.
there's many, many other people who would be willing
Anxious.
to work
Yep.
in that position for that amount of money.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that getting this, getting empowered or recapturing, your authority and your esteem is terribly important. Now, how do you go about doing that? I mean, I'm sure, this conversation is going to move forward into next week and what have you, but we're trying to get people's dander up here a little bit so that they really listen carefully. We've got a lot of things to say about this. I do want to kind of get back to this for a second, since I mentioned the third tablet.
Yes.
I don't know if this can be seen in our monitor or not. I hope I got the position just right. A fellow by the name of Perry Majika did a little bit of artwork for me, and we typed in these 5 commandments. And I think we have time to rush through them very quickly, because this is one of those awarenesses, I think, that has to be there for us to recapture, okay? What we were intended to be. See, what we're intended to be. It doesn't matter whether the viewer is into God or into circumstance or source or whatever it happens to be. I like to wonder what the intention was at that point of conception. What was the intention? I mean, billions upon billions of sperm, just one finally, impregnating one of millions of eggs over a period of time, and that the product is you. I mean, the intention. I can imagine if we could somehow illustrate it like a flashing light and wonder and magic with all that capacity. There's nothing in the whole universe like the mind, and yet we take it for granted and we kind of mold it and, subvert it in one way or another, and we don't celebrate it or acknowledge it properly. And so we end up less than what we could be. And that starts in the womb and goes all through our lives. Here's the thing. Thou shalt regularly acknowledge and celebrate your capacities. We mentioned it. I'm sure that people know what I mean by that. I mean, just what can you do? What is lying out there for you? Thou shalt accept the authorities that have been bestowed upon you. What authority? Wow. Yeah, make decisions, think, imagine. Those are all authorities.
I remember, Bern, I must have been about 8 years old when it finally dawned on me that when I grew up, I didn't have to go to bed at a certain time or go to school if I didn't want to or do the dishes. All of a sudden I realized when I grow up, I can do whatever I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I'm responsible for the consequences
Exactly.
of those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But that was like such an amazing revelation to me. I can do whatever I want, for good or for bad.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? I don't think most people realize that emotionally. I mean, intellectually they say, oh, yeah. But emotionally in your heart, to suddenly take on that knowledge that I have the choice
Yeah. And most
is an
people
incredible
kind of,
thing. They don't even want to because it's
Yeah.
kind of scary.
Yeah, they'll put it out
Because
here.
then they are responsible for the consequences
We
of
talk
those
about people
choices.
defining their purpose, and I can see them not wanting to do that because once they recognize it or acknowledge it or discern it or define it, doesn't matter, it's all of a sudden there's some adjustments it's going to have to be made in order to stay within its parameters. And it's just, they've made it so easy for us not to have to bother because we can kind of go run into place and hide. It's kind of like, for years I've been recruiting people into creative direct selling. Boy, talk about overwhelm. I mean, you've been told what to do all your life and had something to flowing to you to get done, and all of a sudden nothing's flowing to you. You have to be the one that flows. Mm-hmm. I mean, you got to go find people to talk to, things to do that are productive. Boy, I mean, people just don't seem to be able to make that shift. And so all their weaknesses and shortcomings come up bubbling up to top like cream on milk. Okay? And then they can say, okay, now what am I going to do about this?
But what a wonderful place to be.
Well, I think so.
Because how can you fix anything or improve anything if you don't even
don't even know.
And I just wanted to mention back on number 11, regularly acknowledge and celebrate your capacities. Mm-hmm. But we don't do that.
No.
We regularly acknowledge and celebrate our weaknesses. Oh, I'll never be able to sing like you. Oh, I can't make bread, or I could never draw, or I could never this, I could never sell. we reinforce to ourselves repeatedly all the things we're not good at and all the things we can't do. And instead of saying, someday, I'd love to sing. Just one day, I'd like to sing with the greatest choir in the world. Or play ball at Dodger Stadium. Or one day, I'm going to do that.
And think and talk this way and verbalize this way in every facet of your life, because that's your right. And that was, I believe, perhaps some destiny that was lined up and has been denied. It's been diminished. Yeah, some of the research we've done has been astounding when you talk to thousands of people and you realize that all of them want to make a difference, all of them want to contribute, and yet most haven't found a place to do so.
They don't believe that they can.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you said earlier, what was the intention when you were conceived? And I say, who cares what the intention was when you're conceived? What is your intention now? You have the rest of your life, and what do you intend to do with it? You have 24 hours a day to spend. How are you going to spend that time?
Fascinating. We're not going to be able to finish this evening. This half hour just shot by, you know. I'm not going to make analogies. Anyway, this is Life Talk. That's one word, Life Talk, and it's about life and living and making a living and sometimes loving. We've talked about that too. And that's going to come up next week, it's bound to, in order to find a way to recapture our authority or become empowered. Now, I'm being a little bit facetious when I throw that word that way, but I've heard so much talk that led nowhere, and we're just going to have to really get down to it. If people want to call and get one of these, by the way, one of these tablets, we'd be happy to send it out. All they need to do is call 916-366-8749. That's 916-366-8749. And if you live outside the area code, you can go ahead and call 800-661-3490. And we'll send you the tablet and a little dialogue and maybe a cassette tape or something just to say thank you for your attention and for watching. And for this evening, my name is Bern.
Moses.
And you're Gina Fitt. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Bern.